everybody for coming and welcome to our Whiteness seminar. This week we're switching things up a little bit. So normally me and Isolde just present a topic, but this week we're just gonna hear from like a panel of different people, on the theme of Blackness instead of looking at whiteness. Isolde, do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
Generally we tend to start off by placing ourselves on the racial spectrum. So I'm white, I'm French, and I'm Irish, even though I don't sound either. And my name is Isolde. It's pronounced Isolde, like E in salt. And that's pretty much it.
So I'm Lisa. I'm mixed race, white English and black Zambian. I grew up in the UK in a small countryside town, on the East Coast. So as I said, today we've got like 3 panelists who are all like experts in their fields. So Ben, do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Lovely to be here. Hope you're all well. My name is Benjamin, but you can call me Ben. Surname is pronounced Nnene, I think everybody knows the popular Silento song, Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nnene. So if you, just refer to that in terms of pronunciation. So I'm British and also Nigerian. Both my parents are part Nigerian. My mum was born in Nigeria, but my dad was born in Darlington in the UK. And
Uwati, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Uwati. I am British Nigerian as well. My dad was born, he was actually born in New York, but he grew up in Nigeria. And then my mum was born here, but then she grew up between Nigeria and here, but mainly in Nigeria. There's anything else I was going to say, I can't remember. But I am, fully black in terms of placing myself on the racial spectrum.
Could you also, I forgot to ask you, Ben, but can you also introduce what you guys do? So Ben, do you want to say?
Okay. I've just finished my university degree. I went to the University of Essex and I studied economics and politics, BSc. Basically since this pandemic has hit and all the stuff that's been going on regarding Black Lives Matter, I've been writing a few blog articles and stuff like that, and been liaising with my school, trying to, as I say, bring positive change. And I'll get more into that as the evening progresses. So
Uwati, do you want to introduce what you do?
So I did my undergrad, because that's going to link into what I talk about later. I did my undergrad in criminology and sociology at City, so same university as Lisa, but we didn't really meet until afterwards. But then I just finished my master's in international politics and ethics. And since then and during, I've been working for different non-profits. So when I finished, I did a 6-month contract in a human rights and rule of law charity. Whilst I was in my undergrad, I ended up working for a resettlement charity that looked to resettle people who'd served long sentences and trying to reintegrate them back into society. And then I also worked in a social integration charity focusing on young people, which I actually really, really enjoyed. But generally I tend to focus on social justice issues in non-profits. Oh my God, my cat's here, sorry. But that's me.
And Tyrone, do you want to introduce yourself, your racial background and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So hey, I'm Tyrone Scott, or Ty. I always struggle with this. It's quite a long. Well, I'm mixed race, sort of Black Caribbean, white. But my mum, I was born in Germany. My mum's half German, half Italian. My dad's Jamaican. I'm British, I guess, through citizenship nowadays, but I also hold a German passport. So make way all of that. What I do, so I am a housing campaigner for the national housing charity Shelter. So I work organising local communities to, fight back and campaign around the housing issues. I'm also a climate activist, so I do a lot of climate activism. I've written a few pieces around that and been quite involved in a lot of the movement. And then also, as sort of kind of part of that, I'm a political candidate with the Green Party. I was at the last general election. I didn't get elected, but we tried. But yeah, and I'm still very actively involved with the Green Party. I run the campaigns for the Young Greens, which is the youth wing of the Green Party of England and Wales. And yeah, that's all my hats.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We just want to say, so throughout this, we're going to be like directing questions to all three panelists. But if anybody has any questions that they want to ask, just put it in the chat. If you want to ask a question, but you want to be anonymous, just private message like either me or Isolt, and then we'll direct it at the panelists.
Yeah, and any question that's written in the chat, we can read out. If you don't want to actually say it yourself, it's totally fine.
Okay, I'm going to start with you, Ben. So recently you made a training video for people for your old school, kind of teaching people like about racism and how to be anti-racist and things like that. So can you explain like the circumstances of that and explain like, yeah, why you created it and why it's important to educate people?
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Lisa. So yeah, like I previously stated, I have a blog on WordPress, and after the George Floyd murder, the thing is that a lot of my family and friends had seen the video of what had happened to him, but they didn't watch the full thing. Now the thing is, I'm not one of these people that likes to watch this kind of thing, but I was just really curious, and because I was seeing like so many comments on, because I saw it on Now This on Twitter, and I was just like, let me actually see what's going on. And then when I watched it, I was sick, because I was just like, what is this, So I just felt that people have to, if they haven't heard about it, they need to hear about it, but then also talk about the matter at hand and try and educate people. And I think this theme of educating people, I'm going to continue later on in this evening. So when I watched it, I decided to write an article on WordPress, and when I published it, I put it on my Facebook profile and shared it on all our other media platforms. And then my high school managed to see it, because some of my teachers are friends with me on Facebook, and some of them have seen it. They'd shared it around, and one of the teachers there, who is the housemaster of my old house, Repton House, he got in contact with my sister, said, "Oh, I've just read your brother's blog. Would it be all right if he comes and talks for a house assembly and talk about microaggression, white privilege, and what needs to be done to, as I say, try and create change when it comes to racism, and so people have less racist attitudes." So I thought, okay, this is a good opportunity to do so. So I did the Q&A with my housemaster, and it went really well. I spoke about my experiences in school, in university, my rugby club and stuff like that, and I gave recommendations as to how to deter ignorance and bigotry. Then I went a step further, because the thing is, when I published the blog, it had been seen by quite a few people, because it had been shared by many friends and family as well. So 2 former pupils of my high school, their sisters, they got in contact with me, and we actually had a conversation about writing a letter directly to Norwich School, to the headmaster. And when this idea had been suggested, I was like, well, yeah, why not? Because the thing is that I talked to my family about these kind of issues, in real depth. My mum's a high school teacher, and she said that it would be best to direct it straight to the headmaster, so that, as I say, as a sign of respect, instead of doing an open letter, because sometimes open letters can be a bit, oh, what you've done is wrong. It's almost like you say, you know, in almost like a scolding manner. So I think a direct letter to the headmaster was definitely more appropriate. So I did that, wrote to the headmaster, he got back to me, and the other teachers, the other heads of the school got back to me and said, you know, this is a good letter. We also read your blog. We really, really like it as well. And then they invited me to, as I say, produce a TED Talk style video using the points that I made in the the House Assembly that I did. And I decided to get to work on that. It took me a few days to do it, a few tries, but then did it. Uploaded it to Facebook, on my LinkedIn, on my Instagram, everywhere essentially. And I wrote a blog as well about, you know, as I say, collaboration and trying to bring positive change when it came to this kind of matter. The school addressed the issue of racism because they'd recently been in the paper because of 2 open letters that had been written about them. But as I say, I didn't want my school to almost like be scapegoated, because the problem with as I say, isolating one incident to one institution or, you know, one sector. Meanwhile, there's a problem, like, you know, all over. It's just like, for example, in football, Raheem Sterling always talks about racism in football, but it's like, well, you know, there's racism everywhere. You can't just say, right, there's racism in football, and it's like, well, you need to actually get to the root problem and try and solve that before you can start talking about football, you know, as you know, racism in football and stuff like that. So I published the video, shared it. People have seen it. The reception has been really, really positive. And yeah, it's good. And in my opinion, I think that's a good example of a way to say try and address the problem, but without being, you know, hostile and trying to say, you know, what you guys are doing is wrong, and almost like being, you know, in a scolding manner. Because I believe that, in my opinion, you know, collaboration is really important in today's day and age, to kind of say, you know, write an open letter and almost like say, nah, you know, the school has done this, is that, you know, it's just not, it's not helping matters. I think, you know, to say, admitting what you've done is wrong, and that's fine, but as I say, trying to come up with solutions. So yeah, that's essentially how the stuff happened in terms of the video. So yeah, that's the story.
And thank you. So one thing that you address is, like, well, I guess the whole thing, you're addressing racism, but also privilege. So how would you define white privilege?
Okay, so I'd say that white privilege is the societal privilege that white people have, that, as I said, gives them an advantage over Black people. And then I'd say, it's in simple terms, that's just white people not having to worry about racism. That's my own definition of white privilege.
And another thing you mentioned is like microaggressions. So can you kind of give a definition of what a microaggression is?
Okay, the microaggression is an action or a statement that's subtle when a person says it in its delivery, that creates a prejudiced attitude towards a marginalized group, such as Black people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Okay, I'm gonna move on to somebody else, just to keep like a good circle rotation. Uwati, you've had experience in working with offenders. What can you tell us about like the carceral system? Like, what are your thoughts on the carceral system, especially in relation to race?
Okay, so I think we've all had like statistics on rates of incarceration in the criminal justice system in general. So I just got some up, like at the end of March 2020, the 27% of the prison population identified as BAME. That label is, you know, problematic in itself, but then only 13% of BME people are in the general population, so there's a huge overrepresentation. But we can't just think about it in isolation to the criminal justice system. We have to think about how that then plays into like the wider society, because that's just a product of what we see. So one thing that's incredibly important is education. So I think it's really, I like that you, Ben, mentioned education, because high rates of exclusion in terms of like Black, Caribbean and mixed race white and Black Caribbeans, I think it's they're 3 times as likely to get excluded from school permanently than their white counterparts. And then that causes overrepresentation in the prison system, because they're then idle, like no one's actually looking out for them. They don't have like community services, things like that. So that then accounts for the overrepresentation that you see in the prison system, because whilst they're 27% of the general prison population, it's 51% of the young incarcerated people. So in youth prisons, it's 51% BME, and that's ridiculous. How can you have, in a population of 13% BME people, a 51% prison population? It isn't that BME people are inherently more predisposed to commit crime at all, obviously. There are underlying factors that we need to go into. Also, stop and search, because in that same vein, when there was an article that came out today or yesterday. It said 22,000 young Black men stopped and searched during lockdown in London alone, and that accounts for 30% of Black men between the ages of 18 and 24. So almost a third of Black men being stopped and searched. Now, that's not actually the raw figure, in terms of some might have been stopped and searched multiple times. So it's just the raw figure that there were 22,000 stop and searches. But when you're already coming from the angle that Black men are guilty and need to be stopped and searched already without them having necessarily done anything wrong, you're already treating them and labeling them as criminals. So when people feel ostracized in society, a lot of the time they don't really feel the need to adhere to like societal norms and rules and things like that, because they're going to be labeled anyway in that sense, you know? So I think in terms of the carceral system, it's just a reflection of our wider society. So we need to address, like, that's why when people say defunding, I know that you want to talk about that later, it's not necessarily like taking everything away from the police, it's investing in the community, because that's what then leads people into criminality.
So I was just going to ask you if you had any thoughts on defunding and or abolition. If you've read anything about that, what are your thoughts?
So I generally tend to wait like a few weeks to months before forming my opinions on things, because like I am very, very new to the whole abolition, defunding the police. Like in criminology degrees, they don't teach you about like the views of marginalized people at all, which is another thing that I really want to talk about. But I strongly advocate for defunding the police and then reallocating those funds to community services. So the youth program that I worked on was NCS, and I know that a lot of people will have either done NCS or worked for NCS or known someone that's done NCS. And like NCS was imposed because the Tory government, I don't want to like, you know, but my views are quite strong in terms of that. But anyway, the Tory government then took funding away from like local governments to then, so a lot of like community centres, like youth centres and things like that were completely abandoned. And because of the scrutiny they then faced, they just decided to give us this programme to account for the fact that a lot of young people have now been left alone. They don't have after school clubs, they don't have anything. That did not help, because a lot of the time, people who are electing to go for NCS aren't the people who are most at risk of joining gangs. It's people who will be doing things like DAB and blah, 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 like all these extracurricular activities, and not the most at risk people. So it didn't actually help it didn't really help becoming a local citizen, because that's their MO. They want you to become like an active member of your community. It didn't really help that in terms of introducing people who wouldn't otherwise have been active members of their community. they need to have a comprehensive approach that actually addresses the people who are most at risk, if you are then going to take away all the services that would have helped them in the first place. What was your question? Sorry, I think I need to like get back to what your question was.
That was good enough. My question was just like, what are your thoughts on defunding and abolition? So
okay.
So
yeah, defund 100%.
Yeah, defund and refund.
Yeah.
Thank you. Should we move on to you, Tyrone?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the questions that I believe Lisa sent you were, so first of all, what's it like to be a Black person in the climate change movement, and why is it important for Black people to be included in the climate change movement?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's an interesting one. There can be pros and cons, which I guess I'll explain as we go through. But it certainly can be a lonely place. You know, there's not that many Black people engaged within the climate movement, but that's not because Black people aren't engaged in climate change and in combating climate change, just because of the way that the climate movement has sort of progressed and grown. It has just in time become a bit more of a predominantly white and middle class movement. I'm happy that there has been a lot of efforts to try and change that. I don't think anyone's pleased with that sort of label. I know a lot of people within the movement obviously don't want to have that attached to it either. So there is a lot of work that has been done to sort of diversify the climate movement, especially over the last 12 months, which I have, also had the benefit from. There's a movement called the Climate Reframe, which was done by Doc Society, and that was where they showcased 100 BME climate activists in the UK who are doing work to try and fight climate change, and that was a really, really good piece of work to really highlight those voices and to show that those voices do exist. And what's been good off the back of that is we got the piece in the Guardian. The Guardian ran a piece in May about this thing that's called "We Need to Be Heard," the title of the piece, and I can see a progression in the right direction when it comes to the climate movement, but that doesn't mean that there aren't issues, and doesn't mean that I don't see those issues all the time, and that's both within the grassroots climate movement, whether it's XR or unnamed, just climate activism, or whether that's full organized political climate activism within the Green Party, of which I've had experience with both, and neither are perfect by any stretch. If we look at the grassroots climate activism, I find it funny, is probably the wrong word, but as a Black person growing up, the last thing you're doing is seeking arrest from the police. So it's hard to sort of see that as like, if you're arrestable, go be. It's just like, I guess there was a question earlier about what is white privilege, and that is white privilege, isn't it? The feeling or the thought that you can get arrested, and that, like, be a martyr, get yourself arrested, be a hero, and it's just a bit outrageous. It's because they don't have that fear of the police, essentially, because they've not had to, but it's just having an understanding of what experiences other people go through. And I think that is something that was, whilst to be fair, at times probably was a useful tactic for them in what they were trying to achieve. It's not useful for making an inclusive movement, because there isn't, I've spoken to many people, many Black people and people of colour within the climate movement, who really disagree with the notion of getting arrested and cheering people are getting arrested, and the people who are getting arrested as being seen as martyrs for the cause, because all that does is then make you look introspectively and go, well, am I not giving enough to the cause because I'm not putting myself forward to be arrested? But I'm not going to put myself forward to be arrested. I see the police and run, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to be running towards the police and asking them to arrest me. So yeah, things like that still need to work on, but that that is getting talked about, and they have to address those things. So there's been negatives, but positives come from it. And even within the Green Party, it can be a lonely place in the Green Party too. We do have our Greens of colour, and we are really quite organised, and we're doing quite a lot to attack, to address racial inequalities both within and outside the party. But I can still turn up to Green Party conference, and a couple hours can go by until I see another Black person, just like waving from the other side of the room. So yeah, there still can be issues, but I feel that makes it more important for me to make sure I occupy those spaces, because, well, not only I'm passionate about the cause, so of course I want to occupy the spaces, but it also so hopefully so the people can see that, you know, the space is welcoming, because it can seem unwelcoming from the outside when you see, you know, middle class white people trying to get arrested, and you know, and it just might not see a movement that you can get into. So that's why I try to write about the climate movement as much as I can, and really show that I'm getting involved and try and get in the paper about it as much as I can, to really just show and people from our communities that the movement is for us too. Because at the end of the day, when we look at who's been affected by climate change worst right now, I mean, people don't like to admit it, but it's going to come for us too on our island here in UK. But right now it's affecting those you know, in the global south, and it's affecting those, and it has been for a long time, and that was an eye-opener for me. I've always been a bit like, you know, into the green stuff. My mum's always a vegetarian, but I never really was well into it. I remember 5 years ago, I watched a TED talk basically just really explaining how climate change is happening right here and now, and you know, all the rivers drying up in southern Africa, and I was just thought, you know, this is happening now, and it's affecting our communities and our people. But the reason it's not, you know, the biggest attention of the big corporations, the big governments, or to be addressed as the number one priority, is because it's not yet on our shores. But you know, I don't want to wait for it to hit here when I already know it's affecting those those in those communities. So it's very, very important, I think, for Black people of colour to join the climate movement. But even just for me to be in there, hopefully it can attract more people in there too.
I feel like that leads me on to talking about, so you, as you said, you're like a political candidate. So what would you do to encourage people to get involved in those movements? And if you were, or like, what would you do as a Black leader to try and affect like anti-racist change in like your spaces and just, you know, general society?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite a tough question, because as we all know, racism is so strive through all our institutions and structures. It's just, you know, it's systematic, that where do you even start? But that's always, you can't use that as an excuse. It's so difficult, so we don't start. You know, that's what they say, isn't it? But I mean, firstly, just putting yourself forward and trying to be a Black leader, I think, is one of the important things. Again, similar to what I said before, but especially in the Green Party, I know already from people that I spoke to, and especially other young Black people, that like seeing me try and get involved and running for MP, you know, has made them think about it, and it made them think about getting involved. So, you know, that's the first thing really, is to show, again, as I was saying before, that, you know, that is a space for us, and you know, it's, you know, Black faces and white spaces, isn't it? At the end of the day, that's the thing. We need to occupy spaces that we haven't before. That includes Parliament and all sorts. But when it comes to what I do to try and, you know, affect anti-racist change, I guess without going to every single structure and institution we have, some of the key ones, I mean, we have to look at our national curriculum as well. I mean, I think that's, you know, it's quite an obvious one, but we aren't taught much in history really. I think it's like we're taught Henry VIII, World War II happens, some Vikings, you know, and then we got Hitler, and that's our whole British history. You know, there's really brief parts about the empire. We don't really understand what it means, and that's sort of what we're left to. And because of that, you know, people really don't have that innate understanding of Britain's role in colonialism, role in racism, role in global racism. I mean, racism is a British export at the end of the day, but people aren't aware of that because of the education, and that's also part of the reason that I try and keep my patience with you know, with people who maybe do show signs of ignorance. It depends obviously how ignorant they are, but you know, when they show signs of ignorance, because you know, the system has been designed so that people don't know this information, because it's, you know, it's not West, it doesn't put Britain in a good light, but it's the truth. And we need to completely reform our education system to ensure that we teach our children the honest truth of history, to ensure history doesn't repeat itself. And then sort of moving from there, I mean, things we do to affect change. And again, sorry, I don't want to take up all this space, but we touched upon the criminal justice system before, and I don't want to go into it in too much detail, as it's not my area of expertise, and there's many other things. But I mean, we're looking at prisons. We need a complete reform of prison. The stats have been given already about the proportion of Black males within the prisons. Never mind the fact that the prisons are now just profit-making machines. The fact that prisons are privatized and prisons are there for profit is just a bit of a disgusting notion within itself. And you know, that's huge. We've touched upon stop and search, and those statistics that came through, which are just absolutely shocking statistics when you think about it, and they're really awful. I mean, just on with that, I mean, I think the rate was sort of 20, just under 20% were found with illicit items in May. And in May, I think it was 10,000 people were searched, black males were searched out of an estimated 80,000, as we said, in the month of May. And yeah, under 20% had prohibited items found on them. Now, what's interesting is in March, there was 25%, so it was a higher hit rate. Yet for some reason, between March and May, we went from searching 7.2 out of every 1,000 searches with black males went up to 13.5. So it went up within a month period of 2 months, yet the hit rate, the amount of times they found something, went down. So we have to ask why. Why is that the case? So, you know, really dismantling the racist structures that allow this to take place. And I probably could go on and I'll stop, but, you know, eradicating the hostile environment within the Home Office, you know, it's just awful, and that it's really just racist policies and racist policies within housing as well. But I'm sure there'll be a housing question in the future, so I won't go into that. But yeah, I'll just stop there because there's so many things.
Thank you so much for that. That was really interesting. But we'll come back to you and your housing issues in a tiny bit. Oh, wait, there's a few people coming in. So Benjamin, I'd like to move on to you now, and I'm going to hit you with a hard question, but it just flowed well with what Tyrone was saying, which is under capitalism, well, as an economics student, and I believe you do economics and you're going on to a master's, I believe?
Oh, no. I'm literally, like, I'm just waiting for my results now. I studied joint honors in economics and politics. Yeah.
Economics and politics.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you did well. And as an economics and politics former student now, or hopefully graduate, would you say that under capitalism, Black people can ever be equal? It's a hard question. I'm aware.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Thank you. I think we have to talk about what capitalism is. So capitalism is as I say, the state in which there is private enterprise and private ownership of businesses. As you could say, you could argue and say that it's a right-leaning policy, you know, that conservatives, for example, might favor. In terms of, can Black people ever be equal in capitalism? They can, but it will take some time. And the reason for this is because, unfortunately, in today's society, Black people, and it pains me to say it, then many of us are not in positions of power. I mean, for example, I can give you an example. I mean, just a generic example. And if you look at whether, you know, and you look at whether an individual is a worker or a boss, for example, a white man who owns their own company will favor capitalism. However, because there's so much income inequality, you know, in the workplace, you know, Black people already at a disadvantage. I can even give you some statistics as well. In the Office of National Statistics, Black British people had the second highest percentage difference in mean grossly hour pay in 2018. When you take into factors such as education and occupation. So, and this is for British born, so UK and non-UK born people. So in terms of Black people to even be considered in the conversation of capitalism, you know, as I say, wealth creation, investments, and, you know, private ownership, it's about giving them, they say, equal opportunities. And I think that's, as I say, that should be, as I say, the main thing: equality. You know, having, as I say, equality, you know, of opportunity, you know, in anyone's respective career. Because unfortunately, even the Black people that are in employment, you could even make the case that there's this proverbial glass ceiling. Essentially, that means that there's a certain point in their career that they can't go beyond. So, I mean, if you look at all the big firms, corporations, banks, there are Black people there. There's no disputing that. But the thing is, how many Black people are CEOs? How many of them could you say, oh yeah, that's a guy of African descent, you know, who's at the top of a massive, you know, firm, corporation, or bank. So it's that kind of stuff. There's this individual called Sir John Parker, and he leads the Parker Review Committee. That essentially what they do, they urge business leaders to improve ethnic and cultural diversity of UK boards so that companies can better reflect their employee base and the communities that they serve. And after their most recent review, which is like I think 3 years ago, and they said that there are only 6 ethnic minority directors in positions of power in the FTSE 100. So the FTSE 100 is the 100 biggest companies in the UK. And while over just over a third of FTSE 100 companies don't have any BAME board members, Black, Asian, minority ethnic people. So that's the reality in terms of, as I say, Black people ever being equal in capitalism. There is opportunity, but there has to be, as I say, more and better, as I say, opportunities, as I say, for Black people to progress their career, because we can't. I think people shouldn't get it twisted. Black people there are Black people in successful. That have successful careers and they are in positions of power, but the problem is that you're not seeing them right at the top, so they can actually influence, as I say, policy, make the decisions, executive decisions that affect, the livelihoods of as I say, the employees and other people, in throughout society. So yeah, I think that's my take on it.
Yeah. So would you say then that financial emancipation is like the key to liberation?
Say again, would you just say?
Would you say then that financial emancipation is the way to liberation?
So financial emancipation is the way to, as I say, Is it
going to solve? I mean, it's very like directly related to the previous question.
So like, do I think, like, as I say black. Sorry, repeat the question for me again. I'm getting a bit muddled.
No worries. So if like Black people are like financially liberated,
okay, so if they're free, yes.
Way to like freedom for Black people.
Would I say that? I think in terms of Black liberation, I think Black people, yes, we can. Yes, I think Black people can be self-sufficient, but I think it can be, as I say, not everyone, comes from, as I say, middle class, upper class background. So I think, yes, in terms of, that, the reality is, yes, it will be difficult for Black people to, as I say, reach, those kind of high positions. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say in terms of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. I'm going to move on to you, Uwati. So you said that you've worked in charities for refugees, and I want to ask, is Britishness attainable for migrants? Like, what does Britishness mean to them, and also what does it mean to you, if you want to answer that as well?
So that's an interesting question. I can't answer universally, because I know people who feel very differently, like depending on person to person. I do think that someone's British identity is always insecure as a migrant. As we've seen so blatantly with the Windrush generation, like there is no more blatant example than that. So if the Britishness of people who've literally been asked to come here is now being called into question, like what right or what security is there for people who weren't asked, who fled here, or who came here for like economic reasons or work opportunities? I don't necessarily think, like, objectively, can I say objectively? I think, in my opinion, Britishness will always be more insecure if you are a migrant. I think it's very interesting for me to see the differences between my mum and my dad. So my dad was a migrant. That's how he came to the UK. My mum was born here. She grew up in Nigeria, but she was never a migrant in that sense. I think my mum's very my dad's very aware of how he's perceived and his like Nigerian identity, and still very much sees Britishness as like the standard of civility, which we have debated a lot. But yeah, I think my mum's very much secure in terms of like in her Britishness. So I do think that's quite like that's my most obvious parallel that I see in terms of like security, in terms of her identity. I know some people who adopt their newfound Britishness like very, very comfortably. Notably, those people are mostly white. So a lot of my French friends who then got their citizenship have found it a lot easier to assimilate and like refer to themselves as British. And I mean, as a migrant, as we've seen with the hostile environment, like you can kind of create a climate where migrants don't feel comfortable at the drop of a pin. So I don't necessarily know whether Britishness truly is attainable, in my opinion, but it really does, as I said, depend on person to person. Someone might feel very much British as soon as they're naturalized. Myself personally, like you can't strip my Britishness away in the sense, because like I was born here, like I don't really feel insecure in that sense. Like there's literally nothing you can do. But I mean, you do get the odd like go back to your own country on Twitter if you like criticize a racist policy or talk about British imperialism, which is extremely like ironic because I'm only here because of British imperialism. But anyway, but personally, I'm not insecure about that. But I think, I don't know how to say it, but like as a Black person who is like very socially engaged and very much on Twitter and very much like politically engaged and all that stuff, or at least I try to be, you are constantly trying to navigate your place in society and questioning that. And I think it is very necessary to be like, you need a lot of introspection and in order to like place yourself in the world. My brother always said like, what did he say? He always said that he feels homesick for a place that he's never been. So I don't think that he has found his place in this society, and I think that says a lot in terms of the fact that we've had the same upbringing, but I don't question my Britishness, and he does. So as I said, like a lot of self-scrutiny is needed to truly find your place in the society as a Black person. But whether that will happen, I don't know, remains to be seen, for him at least.
Yeah, I feel like the concept of like Britishness is interesting. I don't know if anyone's ever read Afua Hirsch's book, British, but I definitely recommend it. And I read that and just like completely related to it. You know, Britishness is almost like, I don't know, obviously like we all have our different relations to it, but at some level, like it's this kind of white exclusive club. We look at the monarchy and we look like in the past the monarchy had the Royal African Company, I believe, where they traded slaves and massively expanded the slave trade and all of this. And you know, this is the monarchy that's still there, very white, very much a white institution. So now I just want to like deflect that question to you guys, like to Tyrone and to Ben. So Tyrone, like, what do you believe that Britishness is? What is Britishness to you?
I mean, it's a really good question, and I think it's something I won't say struggled with, but it's something I think about quite a lot, being somebody who was born in Germany to, you know, German Italian mum, Jamaican dad. He was serving the British Army, but at that point hadn't got his British passport. But we moved over here when we was 11, or when I was 11. But then the whole time I was living in Germany, I was living on British Army like estates, and then moved to it. So it all gets a little bit confusing anyway for me to wrap my head around. And it's quite an interesting one because my whole life, and generally even now on the day to day, I don't really care. And what I mean in that is like, I'm not like patriotism in the sense that like, you know, finding that identity through needing to be needing to say that I'm British, or needing to say that I'm German, or needing to say that I'm Jamaican. And I feel quite almost fortunate in the sense that I have that a bit of a worldly view, in the sense that I don't feel I need to attach myself to a particular place to feel at home on the world. But then when we counter that, that's me at my highest points. But then when we're looking at things getting very nationalistic, whether it's at home or abroad, just generally, things are getting quite nationalistic worldwide. Over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, we have things happening like Brexit, where I really have to question what is my identity and what is my nationality. As much as I try to ignore it, it comes back and it comes back and it comes back. It doesn't matter to me, but it seems to matter to everybody else, where I'm from and who I am. But for me, I do feel British, even though I have no English blood in me, and I've lived here since 2002, so not even my whole life. But I was raised on the British national curriculum, I guess, in British schools. I don't know if that's enough. I was raised watching English TV, even if it was pirated in Germany. Watching football, even if we're playing Germany, doesn't really make sense. It's hard to really place these things, and sometimes I don't feel like you have to, and it's only because society has forced you to be able to. I remember one time, it was probably a bit of a side story, but I went to watch the England versus Germany in like 2010 World Cup at my friend's dad's house. My friend's dad is like, British, got a lot of, Union Jacks tattooed on him probably. And I remember we watched the football, and he found out after I left that I was German, and he lost his mind, and he was so angry about the fact that I was there watching the football with him and I was German. But I was supporting England anyway. Just these little things that so I don't know if that's answered the question, because sometimes I don't really know, but it's an interesting one. I feel like if you feel British, and you feel you are part of that British culture, then essentially you are. Maybe there's legal loopholes about who actually is a British citizen, a British national, but really, if I feel, if you've lived in this country for long enough, or you're accustomed to their systems, or I've had to suffer the consequences of British institutions, then I hopefully can at least call myself British, if I've had to have British forced upon me in the negative ways as well as the positive through many different systematic procedures.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that's really interesting, and I feel like there's interesting. I guess it's kind of like, collective knowledge kind of, identifies us as part of a group. And it's interesting that you mentioned the curriculum, because, arguably a lot of our knowledge does come from school. And, we know now, and we know through all of the movements that are happening now, that just so much is left out. And it makes you think that the people who have this history, like us people that have this Black history, which kind of counters this mainstream narrative of white Europeans being at the top, in our school curriculum, it just makes you feel a little bit, I guess, out of the way. Well, that's just my personal opinion, because you don't fit into that box of knowledge, you don't fit into that collective history, that collective identity. You're kind of shunned to the side a little bit. But I think as well, it's the amalgamation of culture in Britain is just very beautiful, and it's just going into each borough and seeing the tinge of different cultures just mixing together. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting, it's a frivolous concept, I guess. But Ben, what do you think?
So what do I think of is it Britishness? I think it's an interesting question, because I think if you were to ask anybody, oh, what does it mean to be British, you'll find a range of answers. You can get someone to say, oh, is loving a Sunday roast in harvest or something. Is I don't know, pledging allegiance to the Union Jack, to the crown. It's some people might say, oh, it's having a diverse and multicultural society where there's opportunity for everyone. Some might say, okay, the official religion in this country is Christianity. It's having Christian values, in the workplace, in the home. So yeah, it's many different things. And I think a lot of the points that Tyrone brought up, I think I definitely can relate to. But yeah, in that sense, I think it's just I think it depends on the person, because you're going to get different perspectives and different backgrounds in terms of how people feel growing up, you know, and you know, yeah, etc. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
And you mentioned, well, just at the end, like growing up in Britain, and I feel like, you know, when you grow up in Britain, especially like in a majority white area, you know, you very much notice as an ethnic minority, like that you are different to the rest of, you know, the people. Like personally, I definitely noticed my difference, like growing up in the tiny like countryside town that I did. It was very, very apparent. And I don't know, personally for me, I tried to like fit in. I wanted to have the thin lips. I wanted my hair to be straight. I wanted to just like have light skin. And I always used to love to walk around my town with my dad, because my dad's white, my mum's black. So I'd love to just walk around town with my dad. I'd hate to walk anywhere with my mum, because if people saw me and my mum, they'd probably like associate me with like an other. And so like for me, I very much saw my difference. And from a young age, I guess there was a time where I saw that difference had like a negative connotation to a lot of society. But just off that, Uwati, when did you notice your race?
So I think it's interesting because off the back of what you said about majority white, I've always just been very hyper aware of being like a black girl. Like I've never had, it was never a process of like noticing my race. I've just always been like the black girl. I have no proximity to whiteness in terms of like associating with like a white like family member or anything. Like all I know before I step out of my house is like being black. Like I've never, and then you step out, you see other white people, and it's like I'm different. I've always been different. So I never had like a time where I noticed my race. But I mean, yeah, I suppose I've never really had that ability to be raceless or like feel raceless. I think I was lucky in a sense that my hyper awareness was kind of preceded by my parents making me aware of my Nigerian heritage. So I think that's something I've always been very proud of. And there wasn't really much opportunity for like insecurities to creep in from other people. And yeah, I think that I just never had like a moment of realization. There was always times where maybe I noticed my difference more, like in just very non-serious elements. So like when we'd go swimming, and after we'd swim, all like the white girls were combing their hair, and I used to have braids at the time, and I was just wondering like, oh, why can't I comb through my braids? Things like that, where your difference is very, very obvious. But I'd never had a time where I'd like consciously realized, or like a moment of realization.
Yeah, thank you, Uwati. Tyrone, how about you? When did you first notice your race?
Now I've thought about this quite a bit actually, and I think there's like a difference between like when I first sort of noticed my race and when I first noticed race was an issue. Not an issue to me, obviously, issue to other people. So you know, growing up in Germany, now I moved around every 3 years in Germany. You know, army lifestyle, living in very predominantly white places, and obviously Germany itself. But you know, the people in the estates that we lived on, very, very predominantly white. I can't remember not being aware that we were black, you know, or my dad, you know, my dad's, you know, just very, very, very proud black man. And, you know, it was always very clear, but I never really like understood it. There was never really a negative connotation. I've always thought, cause I lived in Germany until I was 11 years old, and I can't really think of any negative experience based around race that whole time, at all, really. I remember, I mean, I remember when I was younger, one of the other parents' mums going up to my mum when I was like 5 years old, because I told them some crazy story about why I was darker that made absolutely no sense. But that's obviously because I just didn't understand it. But you know, it was never anything negative in a sense. And it's just like a thing. It existed. My parents were quite good at explaining, you know, the different races. But the first time I was really aware it was an issue to people, I guess, was when I moved to England. You know, I moved to England in 2002, moved to a small town in Nottinghamshire, and from day one, I was very, very acutely aware that race was an issue. And it's not like the demographic difference is very much, well, the demographics are much different from where I was growing up in Germany. But it was an issue on a near daily basis, you know, for a good few years that I was living in Germany, and that's when I lived in England, sorry. And that's when I really began to notice race and notice attitudes towards race. And it took a long time to get used to, you know, because it wasn't just really overt racism, you know, it's really, really subtle things. And also when you're a kid, you know, you don't really understand the racist jokes that are being made or the racist things that are being said. Or the people even saying the racist things to you probably don't understand, you know, and it's just, you really start to like slowly understand. And one of the things I really think about growing up and that experience of growing up was, you know, even now, I have a fundamental desire to be liked. And that means that I, you know, want to be a popular guy. And you know, I'm going to the school in Mansfield, and, you know, when I really think about it, racist comments every single day. But, you know, you want to fit in, you want to be the popular kid. You've just moved from Germany. You don't want to be on your own and know absolutely nobody around, never mind not knowing any of the black kids, you know. So you just let so many things slide on it. I still cringe and I get embarrassed when I sit and think about the things I let my so-called friends say to me and say around me. Like, it's awful. And I know I'm not alone in that. And it's sometimes what you got to do to survive. And you're not mature enough to understand what's going on. But it still makes me cringe to this day, the things that I put up with and allowed to put up with, the things I probably laughed along with, you know. But again, it's obviously, you know, it's what you do, survival instincts and getting by in a completely new place. But yeah, sorry, long answer, but moving to England was the first time I really realized race was it's going to be an issue for a few years. Well, probably still, well, definitely still now, but you know.
I think that's interesting, and I definitely connect with what you say, you know, just kind of letting things slide, you know, comments that people make when you're growing up, because you don't want to draw attention, like more attention to yourself.
Yeah.
There's already so much attention there, and it's interesting as well because, you know, a lot of it is a lot of it are microaggressions, you know. Of course, on top of that, there are like overt things that people say, but there's such an ignorance, and I think a lot of the time people don't realize that they're being, you know, problematic. You know, saying things like, oh, you know, you're pretty for a black girl, or, you know, just asking crazy questions about like your makeup and stuff like that, like, you know, your anatomy and all of this stuff, which kids think are quite like appropriate for some reason, but at the same time, yeah, like there's just such ignorance, and people need to realize like what you can say and what you can't say. And I think that's why, you know, Ben, the video that you made is so important, because, you know, especially, you know, that you made that after allegations like that went to Norwich School, you know, your old school, but you know, I expect that a lot of those people didn't even realize that they were stepping out of line. So it's so important to, you know, educate people. Ben, do you want to add anything into this like conversation topic?
Yeah. So three things actually. So firstly, yeah, about the video. So I think in terms of educating, the thing is, when I made the video, a lot of people got in contact with me. So you got in contact with me, you got in contact with me and asked me to appear on this because of it, because you were really impressed. I'm sure you really loved the video. And then a lot of my friends from university, from high school, and this is what I like, and this is why I think more people should take the initiative and say try and think of, you know, simple ways that can educate people, and they say not in a non-provocative manner, because they say people don't like to be say offended and have the finger pointed at them. And you know, I think so essentially people had asked me, oh, can I use your video for staff training and stuff like that. You know, some of my friends from high school were saying, oh, you know, I think, can I share this with my mum who works in a high school? She really likes it. My mum, who's currently doing a PhD, supervisor from Nottingham, asked, oh, I've just seen your son's video, and we'd like to use it. I think that's the kind of a positive change that I like to, as I say, initiate. And I just wanted to ask Lisa, can I put a link, because I put it on YouTube? The thing is, I put it on Facebook, and it's published as well, but I prefer if people watched it on YouTube, because I think, so everyone has access to it. But I can put it. Can I put it in the chat? So people can view it. Okay, thank you. And then on the question of when did I notice my race? So I can definitely relate and agree with what Tyrone was saying. So it was definitely when I was younger, when I was in primary school. Because I currently live in Norfolk, but in Norwich, but I don't. I haven't lived here all my life. I was actually born in Liverpool, but I grew up in London. So I went to primary school in London. And I think when it comes to, as I say, my race, I think no one really had to tell me I was Black. I kind of just figured it out for myself. But my parents, my grandparents, as I say, they kind of taught me things about my heritage. And, I think it was growing up in that kind of, environment. For example, I think, and if any, any Nigerian young adults and adolescents can agree with me, when you go into weddings and parties and you're listening to Afro beats and Nigerian music, and you get a bit of a sense of, let's say, Black culture. And now you can even see that all those aspects are even being at the forefront of the UK music scene. So people like Jay Huss are using Afro beats in his songs, in the genre of Afro swing and stuff like that. And then the issue of, as I say, racism. Again, I learned at a young age, but it wasn't really until I didn't start experiencing it until I reached high school and more so university. But again, it wasn't, as I say, racism as in someone was directly offended. It was just more ignorant, microaggression and stuff like that. So, it was just that, I'd say that's when I started to learn about, my race and stuff.
And you mentioned, kind of Black culture. How does it make you feel when somebody, a white person who isn't kind of clued up on race, because this was our topic last week, it was on cultural appropriation, and we kind of talked about, white people being in love with the culture, but not realizing, the story that behind that and the pain behind that. So what do you think, what's your opinion when people take up the culture, but then just like push all of the oppression to the side?
So I think appropriation is controversial, and yes, I think when you have pioneers of a particular thing and they're not credited, then I think yes, that's wrong. Because I mean, if people to really do their history a lot, for example, I'm talking about music and Afro beats and Afro swing. If people really wanted to look at origins of music, a lot of stuff that we listen to today comes from Africa. African fusion. I've spoken about Afro beats and Afro swing. What do you call it? The Latin wave that everyone was getting on a couple of years ago, and it's still here to an extent. A lot of that is African. Is derived from it's derived from Africa. Rock and roll. I mean, people think that it was like the Beatles and bands like that, but actually, if you look back, in like the early 20th century, a lot of rock was started from Black people. If you look at again history, in the US, when there was still segregation, when Black people had their own restaurants, businesses, and stuff like that, and bars. They would do like jazz bands, with the double bass and the piano and stuff like that. So I think when it comes down to it, as I say, that's the kind of stuff. And I think yes, I can understand, and I think it's not right for white people to, as I say, take Black culture, kind of twist it and say, oh, okay, no, it's now ours, and without crediting, as I say, the originator, the person who actually made it popular. So I think it's cultural appropriation it is a problem to an extent, I'd say. But I think it's an easy fix. It's just, I say, crediting, I think musical artists especially saying, we got this from here, I'm inspired by this, instead of claiming that almost it's theirs, and then, as I say, distorting history almost, because when people in 100 years time from now will look back and say, you know, this white musical artist did this, and they think it's theirs, and it's like, well, no, it wasn't. So, you know, that's my take on it, essentially. Yeah.
And because it's such an interesting issue, I'm going to move on to you, Uwati. What's the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation? Because last week when we did this seminar, we had like our friend Chelsea join us, and even like mine and Chelsea's opinions weren't the same on this, and I feel like it's such a grey area. It's so many different opinions. So what's your opinion on that?
I mean, I feel like it's such a grey area because like everyone's still kind of consciously learning about it. Like growing up, everything's very neutral. And if a white person wanted to get braids or something like that, I probably wouldn't even bat an eyelid at school. I'd find it weird, but I wouldn't find it offensive. And it's only growing up that you see like the disparities between how black people are treated for having the exact same thing as a white person when it came from their culture, that you then start to see the issues underlying it. So, I mean, in terms of like differences between appreciation and appropriation, I think appreciation is rooted in like actually seeing yourself and like seeing their culture for what it is and representing that accurately. And especially like I wouldn't do something that was from someone else's culture unless I was being included by that person who was from that culture. So I would never just wear a sari as cultural appreciation, because that's not cultural appreciation. If I was going to my friend's wedding, my friend, like an Indian wedding, and she wanted me to wear a sari to assimilate to what's going on, then I feel like that's appreciation because it's been mandated by those people. Whereas if you're then just going to take something because you think it's really cool and fashionable and then not associate with the people who actually originated it or appreciate the fact that they're treated differently for having that, then that's appropriation. For instance, like Kim Kardashian, as we know, like does everything for publicity, but then when she posted that Bo Derek braids picture that like blew up, I mean, she appropriates culturally like all the time, but that really blew up because she knew that she was going to be under fire for it, but insisted on captioning it Bo Derek, who was a white woman who wore those braids in, I can't remember what movie it was, kind of just told us that she didn't care about the backlash. She didn't care that people actually had to push laws to not be discriminated against for having these very hairstyles. So, I mean, that's when you see cultural appropriation at its most harmful, when someone with that kind of reach then says it's okay to just take things from other people's cultures and credit it to a white woman who was venerated for having this when other women are not getting jobs for having this exact same hairstyle. So I think it's a very, as I grow up, it's, the lines are blurred, but a lot of the time it is just an inclusion by people from that culture, crediting people from that culture for what they've given, rather than just taking something, putting it in vogue and saying like, this is cool now, you guys can do it.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, it's a discussion that's happening a lot now, kind of what is cultural appropriation, but just like generally like anti-racism is now at the forefront of our domain. So Tyrone, I want to ask you, like, how does it feel? Like, what was your reaction to this like current movement, and what is your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question because I think, as with probably most people, especially black people, right, or black people right now, it's been a mixture of, you know, elation at times, and absolute pure utter exhaustion at others. You know, I want to remain positive mostly. You know, I am always going to be happy that there is a social movement looking to ensure racial or to address racial inequalities in this country and worldwide. You know, and that as a bottom line and that as a base is always going to be good news, you know. So I never want to take away from that or denigrate from that as a really good thing. You know, same way, you know, I have to battle with this myself sometimes. You know, you hear so many criticisms of the movement sometimes, things like, oh, well, it's just trendy now, you know. And even with that, you know, I would rather anti-racism be trendy than something else, you know. If it's for me, let's keep anti-racism trending forever, you know. I mean, like, so I don't want to get too caught up in like some of those things, although at the same time, it doesn't mean that I haven't had my troubles with it, you know. Of course, it's there's many different things, but you know, this whole sort of grand awakening that everybody's had to racism has been it's been a little bit like hard to take sometimes, you know. It's just like everyone suddenly realizes racism exists and they want to tell you about it, and it's just like, I know, guys, you know, been living it for 28 years. It's bad, isn't it? You know. So yeah, that has been a bit tough sometimes, and of course everybody, and again, this is hard, I don't want to get caught up in the negative, but it's, you know, people really do want to do good a lot of times in this situation, but a lot of people are reaching out, you know. It's been quite exhausting being people's only black friend the last few weeks, because they all want to talk to you or ask you questions or get opinion from you, and of course the people who do that don't realize that they're one of 30 people who have done that, you know. And again, I'd rather they do want to ask questions, educate themselves. So again, it's difficult. You know, these feelings exist and they're valid, and it's been very exhausting, and I have difficulties with them. But I never want to take away from the fact that it is a positive thing. But you still have to, you know, validate the exhaustion that it does create, and also vocalize that, so you know, that people do understand. But you know, generally, I do find it positive. Of course, there's been difficulties through the movement. You know, the protests, and you know, some of the reaction to those, and you know, counter protests, and I know now there's been some not divisions, but there's you know, there's sort of two different directions part of the UK Black Lives Matter movement has been going towards, and but these things that just happen. You know, it's a movement. It's early on, and these things do happen. But you know, overall, I'm very positive about it. You know. Because it's just a great thing that's happened. Well, it is great that it's at the forefront of the news. It's not great that we have to talk about it, and you know, I do still get exhausted about it. I think one way I've tried to explain it to people before, or to my friends, is like sometimes just being black or mixed race, or however you identify, but like just generally living day to day in a white man's world, at least once a day you have like some kind of reminder. Could be something subtle, could be towards it, some kind of reminder that, you know, you're black, or you're not of that superior, whatever, just something comes along once a day, you know. And then now that's obviously heightened times 10, so it just can get a bit exhausting sometimes, you know. Even I find, like, I'm watching TV and an advert will come up in support of Black Lives Matter, but it's like, even that can sometimes be exhausting, even though it's a great thing because it's just constant. But again, stay positive. It's good that we're talking about it. It's tiring sometimes, but that's not a bad thing to acknowledge. I think that is tiring for us.
Yeah, like I definitely relate with what you're saying, you know, white friends just all coming to you for all of the information, as well as, you know, it being amazing that so many white people now are going to anti-racism and they're taking that on. But at the same time, you know, we've been talking about this. Like, for example, I've been talking about this for so long with like my close friends. So it's just like, yeah, I fully get what you're saying. Like, where have you been? I just want to take this time to make a note. I'm just going to say this from me. I'm not going to attach anyone else to this. But if you have a question, first ask yourself, as a white person, first ask yourself, can I go to Google with this question? Can I research that myself? Because, you know, as Tyrone says, and as I'm saying now, like, at this time already we have kind of like the stress of the whole situation, and then we have to kind of go and answer everybody's questions and like direct them to like all of like our book recommendations and all of this, which can be frustrating. So, you know, Google is your first point of call, because, you know, all of us, or I'm going to say this for myself, but I think, you know, the Black community, the knowledge that they have about themselves is from their own research. Like, when we go to school, we don't learn about our history. And so I think I can speak for, you know, everyone here in saying that this research we've done for ourselves. So if we have done that, then other people can, you know, white people, you can do that research as well. And obviously we have this lovely platform, Whiteness, which we're going to actively encourage people to come to, and, you know, we need to sort of dedicate our time to educating people. But at the same time, you know, you need to take responsibility outside of that. I don't know if Ben or Uwati want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I feel the same, that it was just a reaction of exhaustion and hope. Like, it's very, very taxing to constantly come on Twitter or Instagram and see like very like emotionally like exhausting content, like constantly seeing Black deaths and people justifying it, and then police not being convicted, and there's just trauma just being churned out constantly on social media. But I'm also very optimistic because it does feel like we're genuinely in the midst of a cultural shift. I feel like there's a lot more momentum with this Black Lives Matter movement as opposed to 2015, 2016. But I was saying to one of my friends a few weeks ago, like, I hope that we're not just back to square one in 2025. The only issue is, I mean, not issue, but the only thing is, like, as it does feel like we've gained a lot more momentum, I feel like we'd come back stronger still in 5 years. But I mean, I do question like the newfound awakening of a lot of corporate places, especially. So the NFL, who came out with their statement after sacking Colin Kaepernick for protesting, and they still haven't given him a job. Like, that's empty activism at its finest, and that's what we're seeing from a lot of corporations. L'Oreal, who came out and said something when a few years prior they fired Monroe Bergdorf for speaking out against racism. Like, they've then given her a position on their diversity panel, but it's just the same thing that you see over and over again of like empty statements when they don't back it up. And that's why people are then asking to see, like, okay, who's your like senior management, blah, 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 blah. Because there's no point then saying you commit to like standing by your Black colleagues and all this stuff when you don't have any Black colleagues. Like, what sense does that make? But yeah, that's it. You're muted.
You're muted.
Okay.
Oh, that just really like freaked me out. Ben, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to carry on that point from Uwati. Yeah, so in terms of how I feel about the anti-racist movement, I think it's good. I think, yeah, and also from Tyrone as well. I think it's fantastic that I think people are learning about the issue of racism. Yes, it can be tiring, but I think the bit where I think is what I'm gonna have my twist on this. I think we need to, as I say, you need to keep up the momentum. You need to keep the momentum going, because unfortunately, and the reality is that this, will eventually die down, and then people will kind of go back to normality. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't really want this murder to just be, as I say, another Black man was killed. Okay, there was a bit of noise from African Caribbean people, from Black people, and then okay, what happened? Because I mean, let's be real. In terms of stuff that's gone. Okay, so George Floyd was murdered. You've had companies, some schools and places say we stand with the Black community, our community is hurting and stuff like that, which is good to see, and it's fantastic. I've had many of my white colleagues and friends, from high school and university, that I've been, inquisitive. They've been asking questions. When I posted my blog on Instagram, they were like, "Oh, like, how do you feel?" and stuff. Like, some were even apologizing to me when I've been like, catching up with them when it was either playing my playing Call of Duty and stuff like that, and that's good. I like, because having conversation is good, and I think we should, as I say, keep encouraging that kind of stuff. I think it's good for Black people to educate white people, because unfortunately, let's be real, a lot of white people are in positions of power, and the thing is, they, as I say, they as I say, dictate and they determine the narrative. They actually say what is, as I say, what's taught in schools, what the policies are for a company and stuff like that. So they can decide to say, we're not going to make a statement, we're not going to change anything. And I think that's the thing. If Black people decide to say, it's getting a bit tiring, I don't really want to talk about it anymore, I think, no, we have to keep up the momentum, keep educating people, keep having the conversation, unless it's just going to say die down, and then another one will happen, and then it will just be the same cycle over and over again. And God forbid that this will happen again, but that can happen. I think in terms of the protest, I think you have to look at it and you have to say, okay, we've done the protest. Okay, what now? What do we do as Black people to, as I say, try and actually make effective change. And then when I mean effective change, I'm not talking about a statue of a slave man in Bristol, coming down and then everybody making noise. I think that's fine, but there has to be more than that, because that's just has a bit of symbolism. Because I mean, for example, when we did it in this country, in America, it wasn't until we did it that they decided to follow suit. Because I can remember when Dylan Roof decided to kill Black people in a church, there was this massive debate about, Confederate generals coming down, and they didn't do anything. It wasn't until George Floyd was murdered, then we decided to do it in this country, then they followed suit. So it's like, something like that. Okay, it's like, okay, fine, statues come down. What now? Have there been any changes in legislation? Have there been any changes to the national curriculum? Have there been any initiatives that companies are starting? I mean, there are companies and organizations, to be fair, that have got initiatives that, as they say, allow more positive discrimination. In America, it's called affirmative action. We call it, as I say, positive discrimination in this country. To, as I say, allow more ethnic minorities, BAME people, to work in their companies. Like, for example, the civil service. Some of my friends, applied to that and stuff like that. So I think in terms of what to do next, I think it's, as I say, seeking collaboration, with institutions like schools, universities, and the government. I think just to simply write into, I think people seem to forget, as I say, we live in a democracy. You're free to say and do, express how you feel. You can write to your MP, you can start a blog, attempt to educate white people in a non-confrontational manner. And this is key. I think people shouldn't get it twisted and say, oh, everyone is against Black people and stuff like that. I think that's a lot, and that's a lot of the reason why we're still having a few tensions today, that we're almost coming across some people, not all of us, but some of us, as I say, have this mentality that, it's almost us and them, and I don't think that's right. We've got to, as I say, think about ways to, as I say, talk to the white man and say, here's how things go about. And that's the reason that my video has, as I say, been received so positively, because I think people have acknowledged that I'm not criticizing, because I think the past is the past. We can't change it. We can whine and we can whinge, but it's like, okay, fine. Well, what do you want me to do? I can't wave a magic wand and change it, essentially. So I think it's important to, as I say, be positive in your approach in terms of change, and actually, not to be, so confrontational when it comes to, as I say, making recommendations and, thinking of ideas about ways to make change. Because, like I said, I think people are definitely, this incident has definitely opened up a lot of people's eyes to the matter of racism, and I'm positive about that, because, like I said, more people are now asking me, on a regular basis about stuff like that. And even a lot of my white friends, they actively went, to the protests. So, for example, in Colchester, in Essex, and in London, and that was good to see. So yeah, I think these anti-racist, the anti-racist movement right now is good. But I think we as Black people, as I say, can do more to create positive change, if you get what I mean. So
yeah. So I've just noticed that it's been like 1 hour 30. So usually with our seminars, so normally we have a presentation and then we just kind of open it up for everybody to kind of talk about, to give their thoughts, opinions on everything that's going on, like, white people, Black people, everybody, just have a space to speak freely. But before we do that, I just want to ask like a final question to all of you, well, to you three, and that is, what does Black liberation mean to you? Like, what is freedom to you? Tyrone, you can start.
Well, so just a nice, easy question to finish off on. No, it's a really good question, though. I mean, it really is about, I guess, when we can actually dismantle the racist structures that have sort of left us in this position really now. So it can just be, I say simple things, but just, when we look at our criminal justice system, when we look at the rates that Black people, obviously especially Black males, but Black people are incarcerated, compared to other races and their white counterparts. When we look at the statistics around stop and search, it's ridiculous when you think about it that, 1 in 8 16 to 25-year-old Black males in London were stopped and searched within 1 month. So it sounds so little to ask, but I think even black liberation would be just, a black man being able to walk to the shop without getting stopped by the police, the 1 in every 8 of them happening, it's things like that, these are the things that still exist. And then when you said earlier, financial freedom, as emancipation, that, of course, I mean, we are, black people are disproportionately living in poverty compared to other, well, all other categories, but especially to white people as well. So when we look at the financial trap that we are in, is as a race, and obviously that's not everyone, and they like to, as a media or as a government, they like to push these success stories to be like, no, look, there is no racist structure. This black man's rich, so things like overcoming that, and really looking at financial inequality and racial inequality that leads to poor housing. Small statistic around housing, I mean 12% of black households live in overcrowded accommodation, 3% of white households live in overcrowded accommodation. So that is black liberation, is not having those barriers facing us just to live, essentially. There's already been reports inside housing reported about the increase in death rates in the areas where there's high overcrowding. The highest overcrowded area in housing in England is Newham. The highest death rate for coronavirus in England is Newham. And we know black people, 12% of black people live in overcrowded accommodation, which is 4 times the amount of white people. So that just addressing these real clear strife inequalities is black liberation for me.
Yep, thank you. That was a great answer. Uwati, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I definitely think it centers on dismantling structures of racism, just freedom happily. I don't know, I think just black people being able to live proudly as black people rather than in spite of being black people. Do you know what I mean? Constantly your happiness is eroded by your blackness, because you'll see something on Twitter, you'll see a black man die while running, another black man die while trying to cash in a check, blah, blah, blah. So just addressing all sides of the system. So that's education, housing, the criminal justice system. Personally, for me, it would just not be othered. Even as simple as to wear your natural hair without it being seen as an act of defiance. That's such a huge thing. It's every time I have my natural hair out and it's not in braids, it's this huge thing. People try and touch it, blah, 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 blah. Obviously the whole don't touch my hair. But just, I don't personally see my hair as a political statement. I just see my hair as my hair, and I wish everyone else did too. So I think that's a big part of it for me as well. But also in terms of black liberation, I think obviously coming from the criminal justice perspective, black is not isolated to the UK and the US. So it's very important coming from an international perspective, seeing that the impact and the implications of British imperialism has consequences all over the globe. So in former colonies, a lot of the criminal justice systems were imposed to preserve the interests of the colonial powers. When colonial powers left, it was then the interests of people in power were then served, but that then meant that the most vulnerable people were left alone, essentially. So things like sexual and gender-based violence, insecure housing, so just literally being taken out of your house and left homeless, is rife in the global south. And that's because they have these imperial structures that preserved the interests of people in power. So if we're talking about black liberation, we need to talk about the black and brown countries who are still facing the consequences of imperial criminal justice systems today. And that's why you see a lot of the insecurity and a lot of the violence, a lot of just general disarray that the West now looks in on, saying oh, why can't they govern themselves? And it's because they have been destabilized. So if we're talking about black and brown, we need to talk about the countries that are predominantly black and brown and how like British colonialism has caused a lot of their problems.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Before I move on to you, I think it just goes back to like the argument of reparations. You know, we look at the global south and we look at all of this white aid going to them and we think, oh, you know, such white saviors helping out the global south, like amazing. But at the same time, like as you said, Uwati, like the destruction of these countries is, you know, the fault of these colonial powers. Like a lot of that, a lot of it is the fault of these colonial powers. And so when you give like aid as a white charity or just, you know, as a white establishment, it's not even I don't know, it's not a gift, it's just something that's deserved. And like, you know, I always like to give the example of Haiti, and, you know, we've cited this example. I think Esort cited this example as well in our seminars. You know, Haiti was like the only country to have like a successful slave rebellion. And after it had a slave rebellion, Haiti had to pay France reparations from, I can't remember the exact year, but it was until about the mid 20th century. Maybe Esort, you can tell me the exact year if you were exact years.
It was, so they got their independence in 1894, and they had to stop paying, 1794, and so that's like 5 years after the French Revolution, and they had to and they stopped paying the debt in 1947, and I think it amounts to a total of $21 billion in today's money.
Yeah, exactly. And so $21 billion. And then Haiti now is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And we look at, for example, the earthquake that struck Haiti, and we see that all of these powers came together and gave money to Haiti. But in total, the money that they gave to Haiti was $13 billion. And everyone was just like, oh, yes, you know, white saviors doing their thing. But firstly, like France should alone give Haiti back $21 billion. And secondly, that's not even a gift. That's something deserved. And it's not just that, more is owed. And so we need to look at like the destruction of these countries and just, you know, the reason why, to put it in a domestic perspective, you know, we see such massive like gaps between in wealth between Black people and white people. And, you know, we talk about, you know, funding, putting money into charities and things like that, but the money is owed because you've torn these like communities apart for hundreds and hundreds of years. You've literally just like, the white institution has literally exploited these people and these countries. So it's just what's deserved. Yeah. But now let's go on to you, Ben.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of in terms of Black liberation and freedom, I wanted to say two things. I'll talk about those two aspects, and then also the points that the other two panelists have spoken about in terms of the past. So I think essentially Black liberation and freedom in general, they go hand in hand. So I mean, Black liberation, if you decipher the two words, it just means essentially freedom, the ability to do as one pleases, but for Black people, and freedom, as I say, is the ability to think or act without constraints. So I think they're quite similar. I say in the context of Black people being free today, I say allowing Black people to have equality and allowing their voices to be heard, you know, but without, you know, people, you know, coming, you know, as I say, pushing back. Because I mean, if we really think about it, I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think a lot of people love to as I say, challenge that statement, that phrase. You know, what does it mean, Black Lives Matter? Are you saying that, you know, Black people are, you know, they say superior? And it's like, no. As they say, shouldn't all lives matter? And they're like, no, yes, all lives should matter, but all lives cannot matter until Black Lives Matter. And I think people shouldn't get it twisted, because I mean, when you think about that aspect, I think people should look at, as I say, past events, you know, that have, as I say, traumatized the community. I mean, if people to look at terrorist attacks, for example, like, you know, in France, the Charlie Hebdo stuff, no one was saying, oh, what about my city? When we were saying, I think everyone was saying France strong, or je suis Charlie. When there was a Manchester bombing, no one was saying, oh, what about my city? When everyone was saying Manchester strong. So I don't know why it is that Black people cannot get that same treatment, if you get what I mean. So in that, yeah, in terms of, as I say, freedom, I think, yeah, it's having having the ability, you know, to not be constrained in thought and actually have being challenged, you know, in some ridiculous fashion, which I'm still seeing today. People are still, you know, saying all lives matter, and it's like, I don't understand why it's so hard for a lot of people to understand, as I say, that notion. And then in terms of you know, freedom, I think countries like Great Britain, they need to, and I think it goes back to, as I say, education and, as you say, acknowledgement. We need to acknowledge our colonial past. Now, when the George Floyd murder happened, I saw this. I think a lot of people, a lot of my friends, who are you know, constantly sharing and retweeting stuff. I came across a Guardian article, and I think I'll share it for everyone to see. Britain deliberately. Now, I think when it comes to colonialism and the slave trade, the British Empire was the biggest at the time. You know, like a few hundred years ago, and I think people seem to forget that that when it came to stuff like, you know, they were the biggest in slavery and stuff like that. And the thing is, Britain they don't really like talking about it. They don't want to acknowledge that stuff. And the thing is, if they don't do that, then they can't be expected to, as I say, empathize and sympathize with Black people. Because if you're just going to say, oh, we had a problem, but we're just kind of just shove it under the rug, and then in the curriculum we won't talk about it. We'll talk about, you know, we'll talk about the US, we'll talk about, yeah, and then we'll talk about everything good about Great Britain, like, you know, Kings, Vikings, and the way that we won the 2 world wars. So I think, yeah, I think when it comes to, as I say, freedom, I think Black people are definitely in a much better position now. Yes, definitely, but I think you know, treating everyone the same is important. So equality, and then also equity. I think, as I say, giving everyone what they need to be successful, because like Tyrone said, you know, there are many places, you know, for example, in London, that, you know, are significantly, you know, impoverished, and, you know, they're not as I say, affluent as other areas. And there is, you know, income, wealth equality, you know, housing inequality, you know, income inequality and stuff like that. So I think when people ask why is that, it's not just to say that people aren't, you know, are not, you know, they don't have the, you know, the mentality. I think people should, as I say, stop using that. I think you have to look at, you know, the history. Why is it that, you know, they're in that situation? And I think until nothing will change until Britain really acknowledges its colonial past, and, you know, stuff like that. So I think, yeah, in that sense, it's important to have, you know, that kind of stuff spoken about.
Thank you, guys. So yeah, as I said, now we're gonna like open up conversation, so anybody can just bring in like any thoughts that they've had recently, any like questions, any like things that they want to share, as long as it's on the topic of like anti-racism or racism and white privilege, then it's fine. But I just want to say thank you to the 3 panelists for joining us. It was a very fruitful conversation. Yeah, and round of applause.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that. Thank you very much, guys, or people. I need to use much language. Thank you very much. It was really, really interesting.
Definitely my
pleasure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm happy to have taken part.
Yeah, well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really, really good.
Yeah.
Enjoyed
how's it, everybody? Not to waste any time to get this platform. How's it, everybody? Nice to be back.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to see you.
So I'm gonna latch on to what Lisa was talking about with regards to reparation. So first of all, for the panelists who don't know, I'm from South Africa, so I speak from that perspective. And obviously, we have a nuanced understanding of racism because we had apartheid, which is like segregation, but it was just a little bit worse in some senses and better in others. But here is the question that I'd like to put to you guys. So part of liberation that you speak to from an African context and as well as a South African context. So over the years, the hundreds and hundreds of years of exploiting South Africa and Africa, what is your views in terms of your liberation coinciding with the British colonialists repaying some of that money that built that empire. And currently, a lot of our people in our African countries are lacking the economic empowerment that we need to move somewhere in life. And a lot of some of the things in the world economics that is forcing us more and more into a deeper struggle for economic empowerment from an international perspective is some of the treaties that has been put in place by some of these colonial lords that still rule us to some extent, that still exploit our countries to a large extent. And even China coming out now as another sort of colonial power coming in with economics and using that to buy up some of our assets. So I put it to you, what is your position on me feeling that Britain, and you being British, a younger form of a British community coming up and taking up position of leadership, would you advocate with BLM, Black Lives Matter, that reparations from an international partner like Britain to like South Africa and other African countries that was exploited should be part of the process of a global unity? Thanks.
I could definitely speak to this briefly. So yes, it's a short answer. So yeah, absolutely. I've been doing. I spent quite a lot of the start of this year and towards the end of last year working on a Green Party policy motion to recognise this very thing, basically, and to basically call for atonement and reparations for the UK's transatlantic traffic of enslaved Africans, and basically to get the UK government to recognise their role within the transatlantic slave trade, and to really look to begin to pay those reparations back within organisations within the Black community and Black people who need to who are still suffering the consequences of the slave trade, which people do still suffer today. There's a campaign, the Stop the Mangamizi campaign, which is basically calling the African slave trade, the African genocide, essentially, and they are calling for reparations based upon that. And the Stop the Mangamizi campaign have been working for a long time on this, and sort of we communicated with those to try and understand all the background behind that campaign, but also really to help us also understand that the need for this basically to happen. So still details need to be worked out, but basically if all goes well, then we will have that as Green Party policy at the end of conference this year, and that's something that I'm really strongly trying to work on. Luckily, we sort of tested it out, and my colleague in Bristol has been able to get in Lambeth, been able to get the I believe it was Lambeth, to get that passed. No, or was it Bristol? I'm going to find out which one it was. We tried to get it passed in 2 to get the council to recognise it first. So there's like a landing point to getting the government to recognise it. Can't remember if it's Lambeth or Bristol who have recognised this and agreed that they, as a principle, believe in this. But yeah, trying to take this forward. I'm really passionate about it, and hopefully we'll get somewhere. And if it's with the way that we try and work within the Green Party is, if we make something Green Party policy, then hopefully somebody will steal it, and that's the plan. If we make Green Party policy, somebody will steal it. So that's what we want.
So thanks for that, Tyrone. I think I should get your contact details and stay in contact to see how I can further that agenda to get that money as quick as possible. So
definitely. I'll drop my contact details anyway in the chat now, just in case anyone needs them for anything. But I'll pop my email address in the chat now.
Awesome. More power to that conversation.
Definitely.
In terms of like reparations in general, I advocate for that strongly. I think at the moment the international community is very much focused on aid and like framing everything in terms of aid, as you said earlier, Lisa. And I think when you frame everything in terms of aid, it's more charitable, you're doing such great work, and it's like aid then creates a cycle of dependence, but that cycle of dependence is underpinned by the fact that you actually owe these people money. If you present it as like human rights, which it actually is, there's a conscious understanding of our duty to cooperate and help our fellow people within the international community and be consciously aware of the historical context and specifically countries that were exploited for your financial gain. So I advocate for reparations also.
You make a very good point with regards to the difference between charity and justice. And that is something that has been coming up a lot in conversation in our debates, where the time for us to just accept all this charity need to stop, because we need to be empowered for a just situation where at the end of the day we can be empowered and stand on our own, versus your charity, which we're always in need of. So you just give enough so for to sustain our living, our daily living. So we're still in the slave trade, where you just pay us pittance for what we do, versus you giving us injustice. And then just to add one other aspect of that, what the international organizations love to do is partner with white people in South Africa. And then oftentimes us as Black people in South Africa often have to go and beg for some of that goodwill to be shared amongst us. And that is also some of the things, because remember, we're not clever enough, we're not educated enough, we're not qualified enough to manage the funds and things like that, even though we are way further down the line in terms of qualification. We have already shown enough evidence of our ability to lead, to be in leadership, and to control large economies. I will not make as if large-scale corruption is not part of our Black leadership, which is sad, because it also takes away from our people. But over and above that, racism is still one of the key factors that oppresses our people daily. So that's also something to keep in mind, that we don't always need a white man to rule in order for us to get something out of somewhere in the world. Very important. We can do it on our own. We can, I promise you.
I just want to drop this in. Like we chatted about reparations like in a seminar recently, and somebody asked the question, what if you give reparations to a country, but then you're just going to continually exploit them anyway? Because the way that our like society and just, you know, the global sphere is made up is that, as you said, Edwin, you know, like, is colonialism even over? Like, we're in this neo-colonial phase where, you know, white businesses are still exploiting people within the global south. And, you know, we see China as well in Africa, you know, taking a large chunk of the money, like circulating around the African continent. So the question is, like, if we do give reparations, do we not need like a complete change of structure? Because the like exploitation is still embedded in these countries.
I think you make a good point with regards to the structural reforms that we need on a world scale. This is not necessarily that we need it in country specifics to Africa alone. Yes, we need to have some political reforms as well, because our political systems are all different across the world. And that also makes it difficult when we try to achieve justice through reparation. But I think this is something that I always speak to when I speak to reparations in presentations or the work that I do. I often highlight the fact that those who are the oppressors, and often I also speak to the white people, I would always say, when you give, and this is the difficult part for the people that stole, the people that took from us, the difficult thing that they have is giving without condition. It's almost impossible. Whenever money or resources or whatever the case may be, there's a long list of conditions that we have to adhere to in order to get that justice that belongs to us. Be honest now, one of our comedian Trevor Noah from who's now in the US, the Daily Show. He makes this joke, which is very funny to me. So he said one of our athletes won a gold medal in the London Olympics, and he said, "Isn't that amazing? They stole all our gold, and now we have to win it back race for race." It's that type of system where we always have to jump through hoops to get back what is ours. So the idea is, whatever reforms is put in place, the idea is generally still give the money without condition, or give the resource without condition, because the bottom line is it has never been yours in the beginning. And all you're doing is you're setting the stage to say that British people or London or Britain in itself and its monarchy would rather be equal to everybody in the world than set a new system of oppression where they control us from an economic perspective. We'd rather have that. So if that is the reform where you give without condition, we'll take it. Just don't give it to our politicians, civil society.
I just want to say on that, that's a really key point, is not giving it to the politician to keep it in civil society. And one of the things in the policy that we're working on is the sort of two key lines in there, which is one, which is that we'll strive to ensure reparatory justice initiatives and programs occur not mainly between states, but more among communities, in order to enable the affected communities and individuals to have their own voice, agency, and self-determined solutions in effecting reparatory justice. So that, to try and address that, and again, strive to ensure that the processes of national and transnational reparatory justice do not encourage singular institutions and other entities that have benefited from slavery and colonialism to then make deals by themselves. So really, it's ensuring that any policy that is around reparations has those key fundamental points enshrined within it to ensure that very thing that you've just said doesn't happen. So it's really, really good point.
Does anybody have any other questions, thoughts about anything to do with racism, white privilege, any recent news? Or if you don't want to speak on the video, you can type out on the chat.
I was just going to add something in relation to what Edwin was just saying there concerning giving without conditions. I think on a more small level, not on a country to country or on a governmental level, or we're talking about a big scale here, but on a more individual to individual level, I think I don't know, it just made me think, like, isn't this kind of what white privilege is all about? Is the fact that you kind of have to renounce to that privilege, and that comes with sacrifice. It comes with, well, you have to give some of, excuse my language, you have to give some of this shit up, and it's just kind of so, but that we don't want to do that without, I don't know. It just made me think of that, like there's levels to what you were saying. Like there's this global level of we have to sacrifice some of our lifestyle, because this is why we have everything that we have here in Paris or London or whatever city or country you're talking about. But on a more local, me as an individual, I have to give something up. If I actually am fighting for equality, well, as a privileged person, I have to lose some of the stuff, not necessarily material, but some of the stuff that I have. So just a thought.
That's actually a very good point, Isol, because that is the expectation from Black people. We expect white people, when you do come to the conclusion that you are a recipient of white privilege, you are conditioned under the conditions of white supremacy. When you denounce all of that, we also expect that some of the gains that you gotten, ill-gotten gains, you will then use to empower people of color. So it's like you said, it is on a micro level as much as it is on a macro level, that you have to transfer some of that, whether it's wealth, whether it's resources, and that's something that I advocate for in South Africa with our white people, that you don't necessarily have to give one of your 3 houses, because that's how it is here in our country. White people have 3-4 houses, and yet our people live in shacks and in makeshift houses. So the idea is you don't necessarily, we Black people, we that nice. We don't even want one of your 3 houses. All we want is that you use your white privilege to empower us in some way or form. If it takes a house, give the damn house. If it takes some of your millions that you have stashed out there for your children, give the bloody money. If you are a lawyer and you can give your free legal advice, give the damn advice. But I mean, it never gets to that point. We often have to still beg. And you know why we, the prison, school to prison pipeline, why it's so easily accessible to people of color is because we don't have the resources to get out of jail. So we end up there anyways. And I think we spoke about that. We end up there anyway. So nobody cares to think how this whole system keeps on perpetuating itself. But I mean, it's based on that. And I'm fortunate to know a few white people that I work with that have given up some of their financial gain, some of their resources. And that's, I think, what we want to preach to people around the world is use what you bloody have from your ill-gotten gains and empower Black people so that we can stand on equal footing and we can build a legacy and a generation that does not have to worry about the content of the color of their skin or anything like that, but of the content that we all brought, whether we Black, white, Indian, or whatever heritage we come from. So that's what we want to preach around the world, and I'll say it on any platform, any day.
Thank you, Edwin. Ella, you look like you had something to say.
Just yeah, thanks for noticing. No, it's just like on the in relation to that, like another thing is like attention. I think another thing that white people need to learn to sacrifice in this thing is like the attention that is in this country, obviously so usually centered around white people, obviously used to being centered in conversations, and now and I think that's where a lot of this all lives matter thing has come from is and I don't know if any of you guys watched the TV show The School That Tried to End Racism, but I watched it the other day. It was quite interesting, and like one of the things that happened on there was that there was like a show and tell thing, and there was a young white girl who basically yeah, all these kids had to show and tell something that kind of spoke about their cultural heritage. And it was interesting because quite a few of the white kids were saying like, oh, I'm really jealous because I haven't got anything interesting to talk about my culture and my heritage, like, and they were getting kind of like jealous of the Black and brown kids because they thought that they had more interesting cultural items and stuff like that. And like I think yeah, with this movement at the moment, like there's going to be somewhat of an issue, I think, that comes against, like, in a way it's going to trigger more racism, but I think that's a kind of a necessary evil that will have to happen in the process. But because, you know, and I think another thing is that the media will try and paint it out like it's anti-racist versus the working class, even though that's not really the reality, because actually, like, I think racism is more deeply embedded in the middle class and upper class in this country than it is, even though like overt racism can, yeah, I mean, as I say, the media tried to paint it out as like all these working class people who are pissing on statues and stuff, which, I mean, maybe there's some truth to that, but yeah, I don't know, this isn't really a question, it's just a general point. But yeah, also just quickly to say thanks so much to everyone who's spoken, and everyone's just been really, really amazing and really powerful and insightful. So thanks for putting this together, Lisa, as well.
I just want to like go off of one thing that you said that I relate to. I haven't seen this like documentary or this film, but I've had a conversation with somebody about a white person who said a similar thing, like, oh, you know, Black culture is just like really cool. Like, what do I have to be proud of as a white person? Like, you know, it's cooler, like, Black culture is cooler and blah, blah, blah. And in that sense, or in that situation, you just think, you know, it goes back to what I said last week, like, Black culture is a culture of resistance. Like, you know, reggae music, for example, which is the example that I used last week, like, reggae music was created out of a fusion between Buru drumming, which was drumming that slaves did on plantations to kind of Heightened Spirit, and Nyabingi Chants, which was from a movement in East Africa, which was a militant movement against like colonizers. And so reggae literally is music of resistance. And it's not just reggae, it's just like Black culture in general, like the music that has come out and that we venerate so much now, it's literally just like a music of rebellion, And so when we take Black culture and we take Black culture as being cool, and yeah, Black culture is cool, Black culture is dope, but at the same time, like white people need to realize the pain and the suffering that came before that, even like just slaves, for them to express like their own heritage, or just to express something that didn't sit within like the white institution, they would get flogged, they would get beaten. And so we have to notice where this cool culture came from. Like it's not just, it's deep, it's not just like a superficial thing. And I think that's really interesting. But yeah, I definitely relate, like we need to make sure that we're not centering white people in this anti-racist talk as well, because it's not, you need to do your job in changing your habits and your behavior patterns. And you obviously have like a place within anti-racism, like white people created racism, so yes, they have a very like strong, firm place in the anti-racist struggle. But at the same time, like for example, I was talking to a friend recently, and she was saying that one of her or this girl that she knew basically just like rung her up and started crying to her and saying, things are so bad, like I'm really sorry, blah, blah, but just like crying. And at that point, it's just like that's centering white people again. And I want to say something that Nonti said. So Nonti is somebody that often comes to these seminars, and me and Iseult went to like one of her workshops the other day, and she was saying how white women's tears is just a weapon against anti-racism, because as soon as a white woman starts crying, then the attention is just taken from like the problem at hand and it's put onto that white woman. And so again, I just want to amplify, like we need to not like white people need to not put themselves at the center of this, but at the same time be active, but just don't come to Black people with your like problems. Do that in white spaces, because that's important. You can do that, but do that in white spaces,
Yeah.
I was just going to very quickly, I'm going to have to go in a moment, but
it's been really interesting seeing.
I was interrupting someone.
Sorry, sorry, I think I was a bit delayed there.
There was a delay, that was why. No, you carry on, I didn't realise I was interjecting.
No, sorry, it's my internet. I was literally just going to say, like, yeah, basically I agree. And it's just been interesting seeing how much that's been kind of happening, where the conversation has been flipped onto like, I feel so uncomfortable talking about race, blah, 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 blah. And I'm including myself in that as being someone who's like, I'm 3/4 white and 1/4 Black. So it's like kind of, but I've grown up in Brighton. So it's like a very, it's a very white place, but it's also very kind of like quite a liberal left-wing place. So it's not, I haven't necessarily been like the victim of so much racism as I might have been growing up in other areas. But anyway, yeah, it's just been, I'm kind of doing that myself now. But anyway, you go ahead with what you were saying.
Thank you. No, it's just brief. I was going to say I may have to go in a moment as well. But before that, I was going to say on that sort of Black being cool sort of point. I've been working on a piece of writing at the moment, basically titled "I Wish I Was Black," because like the times I heard that from the very people who were like giving me racist abuse when I was younger, it's like the massive contradiction there, and it's just like you wish you were Black. Well, everything you said there earlier, or about they want the culture, but not the everything else that comes with it, kind of thing. But yeah, it's just it was just really resonated at that point, because it's something that I really struggled with growing up. So yeah, really key point. I was just going to quickly say before I do, the only reason I have to go is I've still got some work to do after this, but it's related to I don't know if where people are geographically located, but there's a small chance that at least one of you may be in London, or relatively close to where I am in East London. But I'm currently doing a lot of work around, which you may have seen an online campaign around Assistive Space, which is a Black and African and Caribbean domestic violence service, specialist service based in Hackney, which is at real risk of being lost at the moment. There's been a big campaign built over the last week, which I can put a link through to in the chat. But there's a big demonstration tomorrow, socially distanced demonstration tomorrow at 5 p.m. outside Hackney Town Hall. And we've just been coordinating a lot of, I've been working on an open letter all evening, and yeah, coordinating getting the open letters out and coordinated responses to that. I've just got to do a couple bits still before it gets too late. But yeah, if anyone is about, because again, it's just another thing, I mean, there shouldn't, the fact that we're losing such a vital service, one of the last services in London that's dedicated just for people from African and Caribbean descent, when of course we all know why there'd be trepidations of going to the police, in those situations. So you need to go somewhere that's safe. You want to go somewhere that culturally understands it. Obviously there's a lot of cultural sensitivities, and you want to go to a space that you feel safe to be able to talk about what you're going through with your partner, which is not something that you're going to be able to do just to the random police officer. So yeah, really important service. Really sad if we lose it, and yeah, I'll quickly post a link in there. But
yeah, thank you for that, Tyrone. Does anybody have any other questions, comments?
I mean, I had a bit of a thought on reparations. Hi, everyone. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like I disagree with that. Totally think we should do that. I just don't ever see someone like Boris Johnson's government even remotely, considering something like that, right? And then it's like the question of, well, what, do we just wait until there's like a sympathetic government? Like, we can't wait that long, right? Like, I mean, you're talking about with Haiti, right? Like, oh, okay, it's only once they have an earthquake that anyone even gives them money, and then it's all of these conditions and stuff. And so, like, in my opinion, we need to build something external to the nation, right? Like, that's the essential thing here, because I think that white supremacy stuff is specifically built into the structure of the nation. So like with the UK and its basis in slavery, and that's where the empire made all its money. And then similarly with the US, so if we're building, and I'm just saying some sort of hypothetical situation here, like, so again, from South Africa, and over there would struggle massively with electricity, right? I mean, blackouts everywhere all the time, and South Africa is one of the highest producing energy producers in Africa, which is just purely because no one else really even makes that much, frankly. So if you're, for example, trying to create something, in my opinion, is the one way that we could successfully maybe implement some form of repatriations, reparations even, is that you get that external funding from like GoFundMe campaigns and stuff like that installs like renewable energy in sort of Africa. I know it's sort of like this sort of cliche of like, ooh, let's give all the villagers like solar panels and stuff. But you need to go beyond that and turn them into producers, right? And Africa, I think, has a much better understanding of sort of the shared use of land than Western world, for sure. And so, it's kind of one way, so things along those lines, sort of drawing in, use the system against itself, basically, use the strong currencies and then convert them down where, your money is worth more for its buck effectively, and kind of find a way to empower people like that and, arguably carry out a green revolution while you're at it. And great input from everyone. Thank you, guys. It was fantastic hearing you all speak.
Does anybody have any comments on that?
I think that's really interesting. I can see both sides of the coin with that, to be honest. Like, on the one hand, you're absolutely right, there's no time to wait with these things. And can you see a Tory government or Boris Johnson's government, or who knows, any subsequent government really doing this in any short time scale? The answer is probably no. But of course, you have to keep campaigning for it. You make big enough movements, then hopefully it can get picked up in the mainstream. But I think it's difficult because I feel like if we don't, then are we letting the very people who caused the damage off the hook by not having to pay the reparations, if we're then looking to get civil society to then repay itself in a sense? But then if that's actually pragmatic, they're going to get things done. Maybe you don't want to get caught in the ideal of who it should be. So it's a tricky one. I don't have an answer, but it's an interesting concept that I've not thought of before. But
I mean, just to
thoughts.
jump in after that as well, I mean, I would argue that basically what you need to do, you know, I think there's clearly a sizable part of the world population that would support this in some form or another, like specifically, let's say, white people as well. And so if you create sort of, you got to get some sort of movement going, right? And if there's already a trend and you set a precedent for it, it then makes it easier to then demonstrate to governments, for example, that, you know, it's successful in some way. Anyway, just a hypothetical thought.
It's interesting.
I would like to get in on that, and Tristan being my fellow countrymate there of white descent. I would put this out there, and I will advocate for this very, very, very loudly on any stage, on any day. And I will say for everybody part of this conversation, which is an international one, and anywhere else in the world where we have influence, I will say, let us empower ourselves with the education or whatever platform we need to get into that powerful positions, and let's transform this bloody world, because we see what is wrong, we know what is needed. And I understand that what is being said in terms of civil society running this and holding our political leaders accountable for what needs to happen. But I think, as we've seen over hundreds and hundreds of years, the system has been built so successfully that it perpetuates itself without anybody lifting a finger. So in order for anything to change and have lasting change, we need people, more people like-minded, like the ones on here, which I presume everybody that comes here is of the opinion that we need some reforms that will be lasting and will be world-shifting. And for that, I want to challenge everybody. I'm working towards it every day. I'm empowering myself to get into places where I have the actual power, the actual ability to affect some change. And I know all the cliches about as long as you help one person, you know, you've changed the world. I get that. In this instance, we don't need to just help one person. We need to have this global a group of people in power. For example, what happened with Nelson Mandela and apartheid. If the world didn't come together with all the sanctions on South Africa and the white apartheid government, Nelson Mandela would have died in prison. So what I'm saying to you guys, and being part of this group and being part of this conversations, we are that global group. And if we can use our influence and bring it together and put pressure on white people across the world, we will overcome this racism thing. And we shouldn't put it on one group or another, just on civil society, just on the government. We as individuals empower ourselves to overpower racism. That's where I stand with this.
Yeah, thank you, Edwin. And I think I'd just like to emphasize one thing, which is the fact that when you said that this is an international conversation, I think this is so true. And people, at least, I mean, I'm not so much speaking from an Irish perspective because I'm Irish by, you know, my parents, but I've grown up in France. People here completely deny any reality of racism, or, you know, what we mentioned earlier about Haiti, French people, they don't know that. They're pretty convinced that we saved all enslaved people from slavery without even making the link that we invented it, you know, like, it's just like that over here. And I don't think there's many French people here. I think there's just Margot, but for the French people who will look at this later, I would just like to emphasize how much of a global problem white supremacy is. Yeah, that's all I wanted to emphasize on that point. So yeah, does anybody else have anything to add in regards to white supremacy, white privilege, white fragility, the destruction of statues, whatever comes to mind? Hi, Salt Fellow Irish. Hello, Issy.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to just quickly say, so I put my it's just about my video, so I put it in the chat, so that you can actually watch it afterwards. I'd like cut and paste it into like your web browser or like Word or something, so you have it, or Notes if you're using it for like your Android or your iPhone. Because basically I talk about a lot of these stuff, and then I give, as I say, recommendations, and as I say, the way that we can essentially learn from it. So I definitely recommend watching the video, and I'm sure you'll find it insightful. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And seeing as we're doing promos, I just want to promote Ella's platform. Maybe you can put like a link to it. So Ella runs Air UK, which you can probably say more about it if you want to give like a little introduction. But she's doing amazing work.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just so Air UK stands for Against Institutional Racism UK, and it's just basically like just a group of it's kind of, we're kind of POC led, but with a network of like diverse range of allies and we're just basically trying to campaign for various different campaigns against institutional racism. Obviously it's a broad thing. There's so many different types of institutional racism, but we kind of did form as a response to the current Black Lives Matter movement, so it's quite new. We've been going for like a month or so, and we're having I'll put a link to our Instagram in here in a bit. But we're trying to keep we're kind of trying to create a system of activism that's kind of accessible for lots of different types of people, and basically focusing on trying to like campaign for change to end. At the moment we're mainly focusing on racism in law enforcement and policing in the UK, but obviously we're hoping to broach loads of different things, from health to education to mental health as well, and all the different things. So I'll put the link in here. But yeah, it's nice that like me and Lisa kind of have this link to each other as well, because this I think this conversation and this group of people is like so important as well. And thanks for plugging it.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, we've recorded this, so we're gonna post this video on YouTube, but also we can save everything in the chat, and we'll post on Facebook a resource document with all the links that you people have posted in the chat, so everybody can have access. Like, don't worry if you didn't click on every single link here. We'll post everything realistically tomorrow. But yeah.
Oh, I feel like I should post something in there. I've said nothing.
No,
I'll put my like email or something.
Yeah, go ahead. If you want people to get in touch with you, if you don't want to talk to anyone, you don't have to.
I feel like I should talk to someone. I have not been talking to people at all through lockdown. An interesting point that I just wanted to make one last point, because I can't remember who, but I think multiple people were talking about the centering of white voices in this movement, and how that's led to like the whole All Lives Matter movement, because the attention was being taken away. And interestingly about that is then that was Black Lives Matter was opposed by Blue Lives Matter, so they clearly understood the sentiments of the movement, that certain aspects of the community need protection, but just not when Black lives are being protected. But just linking to my point of refugees, so All Lives Matter never really encompasses refugees and other people who are often who need help. So it's interesting to see how in World War II, like over 3 million people sought refuge in like Europe, like British people sought refuge in Europe and in other parts of like overseas colonial territories. But now other people want to come into Britain, it's not allowed. And a lot of that is due to the fact that now refugees are coming predominantly from the global south, and they're not white, they're mostly brown, mostly Black people. And it's very interesting to see how the discourse has changed, and refugees are now vilified, as opposed to how Britain once was, like people just needing help, needing assistance. And you see that in the way that like everything's framed linguistically. So it was an evacuation mission, like it was a government sanctioned evacuation rather than refugees, which it actually was. So it's just very interesting to see how different things are framed when it's brown and black people being affected as opposed to white people.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And just adding on to that, I made reference to this like in our COVID seminar. But for example, like the NHS was literally founded on migrants. You know, we can talk about like the Windrush generation coming to literally form our NHS. And around this time, one of the guys that was responsible for, you know, inviting all of these migrants to come, like from the Caribbean and also from like India and like Pakistan and places like that, also like Ireland. But yeah, one of the guys that was responsible for this was Enoch Powell, and it's just interesting how some years later, I think it was very few years later, he then wrote his famous, you know, infamous like Rivers of Blood speech. And it's just like, you know, it's kind of just like this hypocrisy, because, you know, so like our institutions are literally founded on slave labor and founded on, you know, migrant work and founded on, you know, exploitation of colonial subjects. However, you know, we're quick to accept all the amazing things about our society, but then we're quick to forget where this all came from. And, you know, on one hand, we're bigging up the NHS, but where did the NHS come from? Why is it, how did it get, how was it formed and how did it become? We completely forget that it became because of these migrants. And then we just, you know, there's this like double consciousness, something that I talk about in this COVID seminar, that we're just completely unaware, not double consciousness, that's not what I talked about, is cognitive dissonance. Yeah, double consciousness is a different thing. Check it out, W.E.B. Du Bois, very interesting. Yeah, it's like this cognitive dissonance where, you know, people just like completely dissociate from the horrors and brutality of British history, and not just Britain, you know, many like countries that were colonizers and that benefited from that. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
So Lisa, there's a lot of white people that suffer from that condition. It's literally blocked out. I thought that through my studies I must find and articulate a condition under the DSM-5 for psychological conditions for white people, specifically making it a psychological condition, blocking out how they got to where they are. But I wanted to add to the point of access to the colonial powers and the colonial countries. For example, South Africa being a previous colony of Britain. And you would not believe how difficult it is for us to get into Britain. We literally have to go through so many things before we can actually, some of the most ridiculous is to check if we can speak English to get to Britain, even just for a visit. It takes a lot. And funny enough, the white people that still refuse to accept where they come from and who they are, a lot of the white people that live in South Africa has British ancestral connections, and for them it's easy to get in. so amongst the thieves, there is this common law amongst thieves that we look after each other. So amongst white people, you have that same common law. They look after themselves, but we still have to struggle, even in the little things like that. Traveling, it makes the world of difference. If you have a pale skin, you can get in there, or white skin, versus with us. I traveled to London when the bombings and that stuff was happening. I traveled to London back then, and I literally had to stay in the airport for 4 or 5 hours because they said I looked like I'm from an Eastern country. So, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what we have to go through to be human, to be dignified in our humanity, versus somebody getting that type of dignity, that type of respect, solely because their skin color reflects something. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think something that you brought up there that is something that Robin DiAngelo talks about a lot, which is white solidarity, and how, of course, it happens on that level where white South Africans can go through borders without a problem, but also, and this is where it becomes our responsibility to do something about racism as white people, is when you know, you're with a group of friends and somebody's going to say a racist joke and none of us say anything in order to kind of not disrupt. And that's I think that's where white people's role in anti-racism is really, really key. It's like, it's our responsibility to say to your friend, like, yo, you can't say that, you know? And yeah, I think white solidarity, again, like white privilege, has levels to it. It's micro, macro, and everything in between.
And I will be hosting a conversation on the 30th of July, featuring Robin DiAngelo, and then some of the heavyweights that I work with in South Africa. So if you want to learn more about our context and you want to learn more about how Robin DiAngelo and her work is really a global phenomenon that fits within so many different contexts, I'll drop Lisa them the email with the links and things like that, and you can put it on your page and people can join us.
With pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, so hopefully then you'll get a better understanding of some of the things that we struggle with and continue to struggle with in South Africa.
Yeah, does anybody have any more thoughts, questions? Experiences, personal accounts?
I just want to say thank you to you guys, because it's been so good. Everyone who's spoken, I've really enjoyed like the conversation and how it's flowed and all the different kind of context that we've gone from. But yeah, I was just talking the other day in another like webinar about the role of land reform as well, in like tackling systematic racism and like BIPOC like access to land in this country, and how that's such an issue and how that needs to be dismantled. So yeah, that was just a really interesting conversation, especially in like the green movement really is like in places or education in those kind of rural environments, so that it's not just this really white countryside that we have, and people of colour are able to re-engage with farming. And I thought that was a really important kind of area of research, only something that I've just started looking into. But yeah, if anybody's interested in the green movement, definitely check out land reforms, and like using the land as a site of transformation in the anti-racist struggle.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. If you have any links to any like resources, put them in the chat so that we can.
There's two girls who are doing some really amazing work right outside Sussex, on Orside Farm. But yeah, there was quite a few. No.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy.
Yeah, if nobody has any more comments, questions, we may end it here. So speak now or forever hold your peace.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. This was great.
Thank you.
Another fantastic talk.
Thank you. And this is the first one I've been to. It's absolutely amazing. Is this like a weekly thing, or how do the seminars work?
Yes, fortnights, every 2 weeks, yeah.
Okay.
But we just want to say that this is like a different format to how we normally have it. So usually, and we will continue with our like normal format in 2 weeks' time. But yeah, and usually it's like me and Isolde present a topic. So far we've done like general whiteness, we've done COVID and racism. We've had a topic on like climate change or climate activism, and one on feminism, and one on like cultural appropriation, also one on statues. Anyway, yeah, so normally me and Iseult just like give a presentation for like about an hour on that topic from like our research, and then we open it up to the group. But yeah, this week we had a panel which I thought was really amazing, and thanks to the panelists that came, because yeah, you don't want to hear us talking all of the time. It's nice to hear some other voices.
Is the previous ones posted anywhere, or is there anywhere we can access that?
I'll post the YouTube link in the chat.
Oh, amazing, thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say quickly, yeah, thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you to Iseult. Thank you to Lisa, because she got in contact with me a few days ago after watching my video. So yeah, it was nice to share my thoughts about the whole stuff. And yeah, I really did learn some good things today. Really good.
Yeah, I've been so impressed by like all of the kind of points that have been made by everyone, so kind of like so eloquently. So yeah, thanks guys.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you for another wonderful conversation. And let's keep on fighting the power and empowering our Black and brown people across the world to overcome this racism we will do in our time, in our lifetime. And I look forward to the next one. See you then.
Oh yeah.